Today I am delighted to share that we have managed to capture a dragon. We welcome onto the show Sara Davies, founder of Crafter's Companion and star of the hit business show Dragon's Den. Sara shares her story from kicking off her own business while still studying at university in York to building a global crafting empire and then hitting our screens with hit shows, as I say, such as Dragon's Den, Strictly Come Dancing, and lots to come in the future. So I'm not going to spoil it because the story behind how Sara got there is very, very interesting and not what you might expect to hear. So I'll shut up and let you listen to her story in her words. I hope you enjoy. Today I am delighted to be joined by Sara Davies on Swim Against the Tide. Hi, Sara.
Hello. I was thrilled to be invited.
Oh, pleasure. So, some might think you don't need an introduction, but I think it's always good with most of the guests that we've had on, because we're trying to sort of let people understand how career journeys can go and how businesses can be built, that they see you at this lofty position of this superstar on TV and business and forget that there was a time when you started this out. So I'd love if you'd go back. Obviously, I'm very lucky. I've met you a couple of times. I know your story to a degree, but it'd be good to go back to those York university days and explain how the empire was built, and then we can go through and hopefully meander through the rest of it for the next hour or so.
You know, you're right. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was in the back of a taxi with Deborah Meaden. It's when we were filming The Den, and I think we were talking about, you know, she'd been booked for a speaking opportunity, and we'd got talked to that, and really it was, I was like, sometimes, Deborah, I pinch myself when I think what I've got to say is so valuable that a company will pay so much money to fly me into something to speak for 20 minutes. And she said, yeah, but Sara, they're not paying for those 20 minutes. They're paying for the lifetime that has gone into creating the experience. That means you can talk about it in that 20 minutes. And it really changed my thinking around so much stuff, because I used to think, oh, I can't believe I'm so lucky. And I think, no, it's not bloody luck. It's a lifetime of hard work that then starts to culminate and you start to reap the rewards. So, yes, brilliant. I hear you. So, right. Oh, early days. Actually, I think I'll go back a little bit further than being at university, because I think for a lot of people, and I don't know how many people you get who listen to your podcast who are entrepreneurs, but I always talk about entrepreneurialism. And I say, to me, it's not a career choice. You don't choose that for my job, I am going to be an entrepreneur, because there is no line in my life where the business finishes and I start. Okay. And I know and I accept that, because when I was a kid growing up, my mum and dad had their own business, and there was never a line in our life. The business and the Johnson family life was just all mushed into one big thing. And I think when you've grown up in that world with that experience, and that's all you ever know, I knew that, do you know what? I'm absolutely cut out for this. I'm happy to give this my life. And you know what? That sounds like, oh my God, what a sacrifice. And it is a sacrifice being an entrepreneur, but then you get all the great stuff that comes with it as well. And so, whenever I talk to people and they say, oh, you're so lucky being, you know, running your own business, work your own hours, do your own thing, be your own boss. And I think you have no bloody idea of the blood, sweat and tears that goes into it. You'll be able to empathise. So, yes, I think very much, people always say, is it nature or nurture? You know, are you born an entrepreneur or do you make yourself an entrepreneur? I've honestly got absolutely no idea. All I know is I was born into an entrepreneurial family. So, yes, I probably got the genes, but it was the environment that I grew up in that showed me that this is what I want to live. And now my sister's actually taken over our family business. It's now third generation. My mum started it with her mum, and now my sister runs it. So I think it's obviously in our genes. But also she's been exposed to the same thing as me. We see all the brilliant things that come with running the family business, and she wants a part of that.
I think it's interesting, that family thing, because, back, my father was the same. He ran his own business. So I think there's part of it that it validates you as a young age that is an option for you. Mm-hmm. Whereas if maybe your parents are in a corporate job or in a factory, it doesn't matter what, you think that's the journey you go, where you suddenly go, all right, yeah, my dad does work late, but like you say, we've got a nice house and a nice car, but I don't maybe see him till 8 o'clock at night, which we'll come
Yeah.
on to. But yeah, so sorry, yeah, so that was a spark then, we reckon. So I think that's fair enough.
Yep, that was definitely the spark, and I went off to university at York to study management, knowing that I wanted to run my own business. Didn't know what that business would be in. Certainly never imagined it would ever be in craft. It's not like I had this huge crafting passion and I thought, oh, I'm desperate to start a business here. I just knew I wanted to be in business. So I thought, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to study management, I'm going to study really, really hard, so that, and I actually thought I was probably most likely to take over the family business. That
Yeah.
was what I was thinking I would do. I thought it's a shame that they've worked for 25 years and built up this amazing business and these customers and the loyalty, and they've got this ready established business. Yes, it's only this big and I would want it to be this big, but I've got the foundation, they've put the hard work in. So that was always my plan. And it was actually in my last year at university, I did one of those courses where you study for a couple of years, you go out into the big wide world,
Yeah.
get the experience, come back and then do your final year of studying with that lens of what you've learned as well. And so it was when I was working for that year that I got exposed to the craft industry. I fell in love with the industry, the customers, people who craft. It is not a hobby for them, it's a passion. And they love so much what they do, and it's infectious.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I love these people. I love this industry. I want a part of that. So I looked for where the opportunities were in the industry, spotted a gap in the market, went for the jugular. So, which is always the best way to do it in business. So I did that, and I just think that I ended up falling into this craft industry. And the problem was, I graduated 9 months later. I started the business as I went back into my final year. I had exposure to it in that placement year. Didn't want to wait. You'll learn this about me, Steve. If I'm doing something, I'm doing it yesterday. So I wasn't waiting until I graduated. I had a head full of magic and all these ideas for the craft industry. So my dad was like, well, just start a little business on the side. Just be a side hustle while you're at uni. So I started my side hustle business outside of my lecture time and whatnot. Used a couple of grand that I'd saved up the year before. And the problem was, 9 months later when I came to graduate, that side hustle business was bigger than what my mum and dad's business that they'd been building for 25 years. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm in crafts.
Yeah. I am now an entrepreneur. I have become one. I didn't realise, but that suddenly happened. Fascinating. So how did it start? Because obviously, you assume you didn't have a shop. Was it online? Was it, how were you selling these things? What was it?
Yes, so actually very different to all of the above. So when I worked for that company that year, what I realised was a really big driver within the craft industry in the UK is there was a TV shopping channel called Ideal World.
Yeah.
And so they had their TV shopping shows, and once a week they did a craft show. And that show became so popular, they ended up spinning out a whole separate channel, which wasn't on the main Freeview platforms. Back then, we would watch loads of linear TV and it was all Freeview. But they had a little Sky channel, which had a tiny viewership, but a really dedicated viewership who loved crafts. So creating craft was kind of born out of this. So what I realised is, if I want to reach the masses, I need to go on Ideal World and show them my products. And then I need to get myself on Create and Craft regularly to really build up the brand equity. So I went to Ideal World and I pitched them, and this has always worked for me in business, a win-win. Like, so that you couldn't say no to me. I was like, do you know what? When you've got one of your card making shows on, I'll just rock up. I'll only need to be on air a couple of minutes, and after they've finished selling their big card making kit and everything they do, I'll stay on a couple of minutes at the end and make a little envelope for the card that they've made. And then everybody who's bought this would naturally want to buy my envelope maker upsell. Easy. And the buyer can't say no to that. You'll learn with this. People really struggle to say no to me. So they gave me an opportunity. They gave me a slot.
Surprised me.
And I guess the rest is history. So
Yeah.
I had this slot to sell my first product that I'd invented, the envelope maker. And it wasn't that I was selling it in stores or on a website or anything. I went and sold it on the telly. And I could talk anybody into anything. So in the same way I could talk the buyer into buying thousands of them, I could talk the customers into the fact that their life clearly wasn't fulfilled as it could be because they didn't own an envelope making device. But look, for $14.99 today, you could be as happy as me. You could make custom, bespoke, handmade envelopes, and wouldn't your life be better for it? And that's how I launched.
It is interesting because I know about this, and But it is a problem you've solved though as well, because a lot of when you're making craft cards, you don't make them to standard sort of, A5, C5 or whatever sizes. So you end up making this card and go, oh bugger, I can't get an envelope. So
Well, that's
I know
it.
how your thing
I've
works. You can
I've
make
made a
any
bit of a
size.
joke of it here, but
Yeah,
in reality, if you are someone who is into making handmade cards, and I'll stand up on the TV and go, "Oh, and you've made this beautiful card. That is just gorgeous. Tell me, you're not going to put that card in a plain white envelope. That's probably not the right size, a bit big. You wouldn't give somebody a birthday present wrapped in newspaper, would you? No,
yeah.
surely not. Look, you can make one in the exact matching paper, the perfect matching size. It costs pennies, it takes seconds, and look at how much the experience is elevated. And all you need is an enveloper, $14.99
To-do.
today. That is the joy of TV shopping. You solve it, you identify a problem, you solve it, and you make people realise at whatever level their life is going to be better. And as much as I'll, tongue in cheek it now, for a crafter, that really does make their life better. And therefore, whenever I'm selling anything on TV, I'm only actually selling something that's going to enhance someone's experience and solve a problem for them, and therefore it works.
Yeah. I think that's it, isn't it? And it's like there's a wider point about selling generally. I know you talk about storytelling a lot, especially with your experience in front of the camera in the past. And I think that idea where you've got people spend a lot of the time sometimes telling the person how good they are and what they do, rather than saying, Sarah, I understand your problem and this is how my set of skills can solve it. It's very
Yeah.
different, but it's crucial, because otherwise someone's just thinking, you're just trying to sell me something. Now, the answer might be the same, but you come at it from a different way. And, I've just ordered one, by the way, while we're talking now. I just thought I need one.
I've done my job.
So go on then. So you started getting on Ideal channel, which is brilliant. And that was literally, were you still at uni then, or had you just left? Or
Oh yeah. No, I'd gone back for that final year, the year after I'd done my placement year, and I'd launched my enveloper, my envelope maker, and I really wanted to make them in plastic, because if I made them in plastic, I made a couple of quid profit. I made about £3.50 profit on each one. Brilliant. But it was a £30,000 tool that I needed to get the setup, right? And I didn't have 30 grand. And I think a lot of businesses, as soon as they come across a hurdle like that, it's a reason to stop. Oh, I can't make it work. Or I need to get investment, or I need to sell some of the company, or go into debt, or whatever. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. And so for me, I had to make them in MDF. So the local joiner in our village made them. And yeah, I didn't make as much profit on each one. I only made £1 on each one. But I only needed to sell 30,000 of them to have made enough profit to pay for the plastic tooling. And then going forward, I would make loads more profit on each one. And I used that profit to pay for the next item that I'd invented and come up with. And so I always had it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. I always reinvested the money that we had to grow the business. And so that's all I've ever known.
Brilliant. I love it. So you left uni. You obviously decided not to go into mum and dad's business, obviously, with what was going on with yours. So how did you get to the sort of Crafters Companion setup that we all see now from the outside, with websites and retail and trips to America, or not, as the case may be now, but that sort of thing?
So interestingly, and I learned a really, really valuable life lesson in that first year. I'd had the TV shopping channel, was to give me brand exposure. I now needed to be able to transact and make the big money, which was direct to consumer. So I decided, right, I didn't have enough money to pay to have a website built, couldn't afford a company to do that. So therefore, I'll have to go to night classes, because that's how we did things those days. We didn't really learn stuff on YouTube or whatever. I'd go to night classes, learn, is it like Dreamweaver or something like I needed to learn how to build a website. And so I went to my tutor at university and I said, can you just recommend a night class I could take and learn how to build a website? I need to really learn in the next 8 weeks. And he said, let me give you a piece of advice. He said, focus on the stuff that you're good at and pay people the best you can to do the stuff that you're not good at. And I said, you haven't heard us, Tony. I haven't got any money. That's why I'm doing it myself. I haven't got any money. I can't afford to pay a company thousands of pounds to build a website. And he said, no, you've got to think outside the box. He said, there's a kid in the year below you at university, absolute whiz geek, right? Bung him a couple £100. He'll build your website for you. He'll do it in a couple of weeks. And it means you won't waste your time. And the thing is, it was ideal, because if I'd tried to build a website, I would have, the opportunity cost of me doing that versus other
That's
things
it.
where I
Yeah.
made more money. And also the website wouldn't have been anywhere near as good as what he could have done. And yes, that was my level. But the problem was, again, I was only thinking, I haven't got thousands and thousands of pounds. I'm just starting out. Found a different solution. So I literally had a little website that Craig, lovely lad the year below me, built for us. And that's how I got started. So I used to sell on the TV shopping channels. It was a brilliant way to make money, generate cash, but also raise brand awareness. Then I had my direct-to-consumer website, which used to take 4 or 5 orders a day. And my friend's mum, my friend's little mum, she was called Camilla. She was my first ever employee. She used to come to my mum and dad's house, sit in my sister's bedroom. I used to email her the orders. She'd print them off, pack the envelopes, take them up to the post office, weigh them, get them sent off. And then the third strand is I was trying to sell to the shops. So I remember taking a little £15 advert in the back of the Craft Business magazine. I remember getting my friend to stand and hold the envelope maker like this so I could pause, do a picture, designed my own advert, put it in Craft Business. And, if you wanted a free information pack, ironically, you had to send a fax because it was all faxes back then. God, I
A bit of
sound so
facts.
old.
There we go. I'm loving it.
So you would
Yeah.
fax off for your free information pack. And the fax number was actually my mum and dad's shop because I didn't have my own fax machine because I didn't want to pay for a phone line. So you used to fax Weir Valley Decorating Centre details for your information pack, and then my mum would ring us up on a night and give us the information, and I used to print a little information pack out and send it off in the post and then follow them up a few days later. Did you want to place an order?
This is brilliant. This is absolutely gold because this is my point, isn't it? Where people always see the finished product of people, as in where they've got to,
Yep.
and you've only got to where you've got to because you did that.
Got that.
And it's
Yep.
hilarious. I had my first website built by a client who was a
Oh.
whiz. And he was a really good, he'd give me some work in his role. He says, I really like building websites. Do you want a hand? And literally, same as you did, I was like, come on then. And we spent about 4 nights together. Here's some copy. And he'd chuck it in. And I met him instantly just before Christmas. And the first thing he said was, do you remember that website we built? And it's like 20 years ago. And it's just fantastic that people never forget that.
Yeah.
Oh dear, I love it.
You never forget the people that have helped you out along the way when you've got set up.
Yeah, it's crucial, isn't it? And because you couldn't have done it without them, and that's the thing you realise. So it's interesting. So you're very early on, thanks to your tutor, worked out, stick to what you're good at, stick to your knitting, and then get the support. So people might not know, but you and your husband have been in the business for a lot of the time, haven't you? Simon has been your rock and so. First of all, I have to know, because I love my wife dearly, but I could never work with her. How have you managed, especially when you become a mum and stuff, to be both business partners, life partners, and parents at the same time? How have you juggled that?
So I think when we launched the business, and I ran at it hard, and I lived to work, and I worked every hour that God sent, and he had a fantastic career, and he loved his job, and so he was really focused on his career. And it was about 18 months, 2 years in, we were actually at the time going through a big legal battle defending the patent on the enveloper. And he just came home from one day and he said, I have worked out that we've got enough money in the bank that we can pay off the mortgage, and I'm going to leave work, and I'm on 3 months' notice, and I'll come and run the company from the 1st of March. And I was floored.
Yeah.
And I was so relieved, because I'm not cut out to run a business. I'm not a one for detail. I'm not interested. I love all the fancy stuff. I love product development, marketing, sales, all the exciting stuff that drives the business. I don't want to talk about operations, logistics, HR, finance, all the operational side. Nah, does not float my boat. I can do it, because you have to be able to do it as a business owner.
You have to learn, don't you? Yeah.
Doesn't get me out of bed on a morning, doesn't get me excited, right? And so he's got the complete opposite set of skills to me. We're like complete opposites in all walks of life. And we've been together since I was 15, so childhood sweetheart. So he's been on the journey with me. And he was like, do you know what? I'll come and I'll do all of this stuff that I'm good at. Because he worked out that for our family, and even though it was the same family, it was just the two of us, financially, what he was earning was not that it was negligible, but clearly our future financial security was going to be based on the business. And he could see that the foundations were there. So, and he could also see that because I wasn't the best operator, I wasn't making the most amount of money. I was making good money because
Yeah.
we made loads of cash, really profitable. But if he could systematically work, and he did, in his first month, he worked through every line of our cost base, and he saved more than his whole annual salary in the first month. And I'm like, that's the difference. So,
Yeah.
but he, the
Brilliant.
decision, he did that because it was right for our family,
Yeah.
and not, it wasn't about what he wanted to do or what he would enjoy more. And I was so painstakingly aware of this, that he'd gone from having a really high powered job with a lot of direct reports, used to travel all over Europe, really highly thought of, went to work in a suit and tie every day, fantastic
Proper
career,
grown up then, yeah.
really grown up. And he went from that to, I only had 8 staff, and he was
Yeah.
going to work in a tracksuit, and unloading wagons, because that's what we had to do in small business, and you just all have to muck in. And I felt so overwhelmingly guilty that he'd given up his career so that I could live my dream. And yes, financially, because he's an accountant as well, which means everything's just about risk profile and manage. Financially, it made so much sense for us. But
Yeah.
I'm not about financial stuff. I'm about feelings. And to me, my life didn't change. I'm doing all the amazing stuff. He gave up something he loved so that I could have
Yeah.
my life and my dream. And I felt so appreciative of that and so grateful and so guilty that I was basically prepared to do whatever he asked. So his one thing was, if I'm going to do this, you don't spend all day, every day sitting on my shoulder, get me to justify everything, looking at this, why are you doing that? I want to be involved in this. He said, if nothing else, it's going to royally piss us off. He said, but then also we won't achieve anything, because all the time that we're trying to save you doing this stuff, you'll still be wasting it watching me do it. So the deal is, you crack on and do your thing, and I'll crack on and do my thing, and we'll not get in each other's ways. And so I, from that day forward, ran at 100 mile an hour, left a massive trail of destruction behind me, and he came along with a sweeping brush. And it worked, an absolute treat. And I never questioned the why or the how, never really understood what he did, why he did it, how he did it. I just know we made really good money. So I
Yeah.
let him crack on with that, and I did the stuff I was good at.
I think that's key, isn't it? And it's back to that, we've all got different superpowers. And if you got 3 people like you, it would be chaos. Or you got even 3
Oh,
people
Christ.
like your husband, in terms, it wouldn't be chaos, but a very different business, wouldn't it? It would never have a sale.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you start to understand. I think what was interesting, you talked about it, like you drew some very fine lines that said, this is my bit, this is your bit. We'll work together. So do you think, actually, out of interest saying that, it was interesting the language you used, Sarah, about that there was nearly a bit of, I don't want to use the word guilt, but maybe was that actually, because of what he'd done, that was an even bigger drive for you to be successful?
It was an enormous drive. I remember standing up. So he joined the business kind of 2 years in. It was our 10-year anniversary at work, and we had hosted a really big dinner. I had clients from all over the world come in, all of our staff, everything like that. And I stood up in a room full of 300 people and gave like a 45-minute history of the company.
Yeah.
And as part of that, I spoke about Simon. And it's the first time on a stage I'd really acknowledged like what it was and what he'd done. And I had that realization of the drive for me. I felt like he'd given up so much to come and run this business. I wanted this business to be big enough and challenging enough to be deserving of him. I wanted
Wow.
him. He didn't leave that career to take on this career for career fulfillment. He did it because it was what our family needed.
Yeah.
I wanted him to be able to have the career fulfillment, and that was a bigger driver than whatever career fulfillment I wanted. So
Brilliant.
that was my big
Yeah.
driver of wanting to grow the business, because I wanted it to be something he would enjoy. And I remember it was when we got to about 10 years in, and we were a 10 million turnover business, and we had 100 plus staff or whatever, that I really felt like it was justifying of his skill set.
I love it. That's amazing, isn't it? And you look at that journey. And I think that's just it, isn't it? You started one way thinking that's why you were doing it, because you could. And then you realise as you grow and develop, there will be other drivers that keep you going, because it's a long journey. 2005, so you're at 20 years now.
Yep.
With that business alone. Never mind those other little bits you've been doing on the side to keep you off the streets.
My other side hustles.
Yes. Which hat are you wearing now? But I think it's good for people to understand where you start, you certainly won't finish. And actually, you won't even know where you're going to zigzag across the world when you literally, but in terms of finding your dream and fulfilling and looking for opportunity.
I just think I approach everything as an opportunity, and I'm
Yeah,
just eyes wide open to everything, and I'm prepared to give anything a go. And you never know what's going to lead to what. I can
yeah,
always anything I'm doing in my life, I can always pitch it back to. I can always peel back where did that come from, and it always comes from opportunities and just being out there and putting yourself out there. It's like when people say to me, "Oh, networking." I hate networking. I can't go to networking opportunities and do this. And I say, business doesn't come to you. Get off your ass.
yeah,
Go and look for it. And it's the same in life. Life opportunities, business opportunities. They're never going to come to you. You've got to go and find them.
yeah. It's fascinating. My business partner that you've met, Midge, he always used to take the mickey out of me. He's like, because I'd always be going for coffee, going to an event, going for dinner, going for lunch. And he took the mickey because it's his biggest nightmare to do it. So he'd like do that. Whereas I'd be like, yeah, but you never know. And like you say, you'll meet 10 people and nothing will come of it, but one will just be life changing to the business.
Yeah.
And if you're not there, you're never going to have that
You're never
opportunity,
going to
are
have
you?
it. Mm-hmm.
I think that was a massive thing I was worried about. We've got lots of young folk that work here. And when COVID came along, it put everybody, obviously, we all got through it by working from home. And it's not that I want everybody back in the office, but I want everybody to realise that meeting people now is crucial to their career, because we win, very lucky, we win lots of work through what we call Black Book, which is our old network. And it's all the people we've met on our 25-year journey. And I worry now that if this generation aren't meeting like we met, and it was a slightly different world in that I used to be
Yeah,
out
but it's
just about every day.
it's a different world, but it's the same principle.
Yeah, you're right. And until you've met someone, because there's so many people like you out there, and you worry, like you say, some people, and I'm nervous going to some of these things. You sort of, right, psych yourself up. But you will always find someone that's like you and in the same situation, and you connect, and within time, those opportunities come out. So I think that's brilliant. So yeah, so gosh, right, we're nearly we're halfway through. I think we've just got out of uni, haven't we?
I know this is the problem with me, Steve. It's never shutting us up. It's never getting us talking. It's shutting us up.
No, so tell us. So look, there's one bit we can't miss because it's something I know you're very proud of, and you should be,
But
which is your award that you got of an MBE in 2016, I think, wasn't it?
God,
Come on.
so I don't know if there's anybody out there listening who's received an MBE, but it's quite the process. So what happens is you get a letter in the post from the palace saying that you've been shortlisted to potentially receive an MBE, right? And you're not allowed to tell anyone. So there was me and my assistant because she'd opened the letter. So I literally didn't tell anyone. And then it was a couple of months later, and I thought, well, how do you know when they decide? Because, like, I'm desperate to
Yeah,
know.
I'm hanging around.
So,
What's going on?
so I rang the palace. I said, sorry, Daisy, I've got this letter dated such and such. I just wondered when you would decide, like,
Yeah.
which ones you pick to actually get it, and how do you let us know if we've been decided? And they said, oh, no, if you've got that letter, you're getting it. I was like, oh, all right, absolutely brilliant, brilliant. So it's not that I'm sure I'm getting this, fantastic, right? And they said, yes, so there'll be another letter coming out in a few weeks, and you'll choose the date as to when you're going. Now, I was pregnant at the time, and so they sent the dates out, and of all the dates, there was one date before I gave birth, and all of the other investiture dates when you would go to the palace were after I gave birth.
Oh
And I
no,
was
yeah.
like, this is going to be the biggest moment of my life. This photograph is going to be, never mind the graduation photos, this is like graduation on another level. This is going to be the one hanging up above the mantelpiece, right? The last thing I want is to be up there on the mantelpiece looking really fat with bags under my eyes because I
Yeah.
haven't slept
No
in days,
sleep for
big
weeks. Yeah.
leaky patches round my boobs. Like, I just thought that's not the picture I want on the
No, it's
mantelpiece,
strange
right?
that. Yeah.
So, whereas if I could go at the end, before I give birth, it's very obvious I'm not fat. I'm carrying a child,
Preggers.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then also, my hair will be lovely, my skin will be glowing, I'll have that pregnancy glow,
You'll be in
all
that
of
third
that.
trimester, everything
That was
beautiful
the
and
one.
glowing.
Absolute. So, we booked it for like the investiture was when I was 37 weeks pregnant. It was right. Well, so once I got the date, now they announce it in the it was the birthday honours list. It was Queen's birthday honours list, so it was getting announced in the Sunday Times or whatever on the Saturday morning, which meant that I'd done interviews with all the press all week. All embargoed was going to be Sunday morning. And I was thinking, I don't want my mum and dad to read this in the Sunday papers. Like, I want to tell them. So I rang the palace again and I said,
It's like, oh no, it's her again.
Right. Could I have special dispensation to tell my family? And I'll tell them only on the Friday night at 9 o'clock, and I'll say no one's allowed to put anything on social media, but it's coming out. I mean, it was being released at 11 o'clock on the Friday night for the press for the Saturday morning.
Right, okay.
So I think, looking back now, I think they just probably thought I was ridiculous, and I can't believe I even rang to ask. But I felt like I had to ask permission. They put the favour God into me. So we took the whole family for dinner. So there was like 22 of us. We're in this amazing private dining room, and nobody knew why we were at dinner.
Yeah.
And all of my friends and family, well, the close family are there thinking, oh my God, what's going
happened?
on? And Simon got up to make the speech. And I remember his opening line was, so I'm sure you're all worried that we've brought you here to tell you that it's going to be twins. And my mum and dad are like, I could see the heartbeat out the chest. And he said it wasn't. And he said what it was. And I remember my dad, we were at dinner, and he got so overcome with emotion, and he doesn't like to cry in front of people. So he got up and walked out the room because he was crying. And then he realised that he wasn't going to hear the rest of it. So then he came into the room, but then he was embarrassed. So he sat on the floor in the corner of the room, and he was rocking backwards and forwards. He was so overwhelmed, and it was just one of the best moments in my life. As much as it was fabulous to go to the palace, when I think of my MBE, I think of that moment and him sitting in the corner of the Pavilion restaurant at Iveston in concert, rocking backwards and forwards because he can't get out the words that he wants to. Yeah. And then actually the day in the palace was fabulous. It was, I had a fabulous new hat and a new outfit and some lovely new shoes, and I can always remember because I was like 37 weeks pregnant. So I had these 4-inch Louboutins that I'd treat myself to because I couldn't buy a nice dress because there was only a handful of dresses I could have worn, You
just wrap yourself around
spent the money on the shoes instead. And I remember you're not allowed to ever turn your back on royalty. So as I walked up to Prince William, I got to him and he just took one look and he went, wow, that looks like it's coming soon. Well, from booking the investiture to then, I'd then been told my baby was big and I'd be induced early. So then they had to rebook me in the hospital. I ended up going straight from the palace the next morning, getting the train from London and getting off at Durham and going straight to the hospital. Didn't even come home. Do not pass go, do not collect £200. Straight from Buckingham Palace, straight to the hospital. A day later, we get a baby.
Love it. I hope you called it William. Oh, that's wonderful. And like you say, that lovely moment with your dad, and obviously had been a big influence to you to start your career, that you can nearly give him something back in a roundabout way is just fab, isn't it?
Exactly what it was. Honestly, they looked like proud as punch. My mum and dad and my husband in the audience that day. It was priceless.
Amazing. So look, so that's 2016, and the business was growing and being successful. And you've got this idea of potentially, why don't I go on TV, haven't you? Well, I mean, it's a natural progression, isn't it? I mean, you're running a successful business, you've got the MBE. Right, what's next? Come on, let's get our life a bit busier, please.
Do you know, it was a friend of mine, and it was a friend. So it doesn't sound so far-fetched that I would do investing, because I'd actually been in an all-female investment group in the northeast of England a few years earlier called Gabriel Investors. And Rumman, the friend of mine, had done the PR for Gabriel Investors. So that's how I knew him. And we were chatting one day and he said to us, I think you'd be brilliant on Dragon's Den. And I said, yeah, I think I would. Like, I feel like it was made for me. Like it was. And he said, oh, well, why don't we talk to the BBC? And I said, well, you don't just ask if you can be a dragon. You got to wait till they notice you and then they offer you it. He said, we could be waiting years. Why do we not just ring the BBC and put you on their radar? And I said, don't be so ridiculous. I'm only 32. Like, all them dragons are old.
Hang on, and this is coming from a lady who kept ringing the palace to check, and you're worried about ringing the BBC. Come on.
So he said, and he really challenged me on that. I didn't feel like I was old enough to do it.
Yeah.
And he said, why is age relevant? He said, it's experience. And this is a really big life lesson for me. He said, you've got the same number of years experience as a lot of people who've been on that show. Yeah. It's just you started your business a lot sooner. So why should you wait till you're older? Why not do it now? So he did stir. And I was like, you're right. Still didn't ring the BBC. Didn't have the same gumption that I did to ring the palace. So he rang them. And he rang the BBC the next week and said, went through the process as though he was applying to be on the show, got through to a producer, and then said, right, actually, I'm not ringing because I want to be on the show. I'm ringing to tell you about my friend. She's absolutely awesome. She'd be a brilliant dragon. And when are you casting for a female dragon? How do I put a name forward? And they were like, oh, actually, we're casting now. So, yeah, send us her details. We'll have a chat with her. And the rest's history.
That's how it works.
There you go. So if you if anyone ever wants to know how do you get to be a dragon on the BBC, you just ring up the BBC and ask if you can be a dragon.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Obviously, you've shared this story with me before, but talk to me when you obviously went for your auditions and what they asked you to do that you didn't do. And I think it's probably been a genius move, hasn't it, for how you are now regarded in terms of the dragons.
Do you know, I spent a lot of my 20s trying to be whoever I thought I needed to be to justify being in the room I'd been invited to be in. And I would spend all the time wearing power suits and, you know, and just behaving how I felt like I needed to be in whatever business meeting, boardroom, whatever it was I was in, right? And by the time I got to my 30s, I started to be a little bit more confident in my own skin, but not totally confident, but a bit more confident than I had been, right? And I can remember going down for my screen test, and and I've still got this dress to the day. I had this bright orange wrap dress, and it was so the opposite of what I ever saw anybody wearing on Dragon's Day.
Right, yeah.
But it was so me, and it was such a reflection of my personality, and I thought, I'm going to wear that dress. And so I went down in that dress, and I'd had a chat with the producer the day before, and the exec producer, Chia Cario, who was recruiting me, fantastic executive producer. And when she'd done a call with me, they'd narrowed me down to the last 8 or something. And she said, we think you're brilliant. We think you could be a great dragon. The only thing is, you could do with being a little bit more dragony. And I was like, well, what do you mean dragony? She said, well, you know, it's Dragon's Den, so it's show your teeth, be fierce, you know. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was thinking about this when I was picking an outfit out to wear in the wardrobe, and I was going along all the black structured dresses, then there's a dark grey one, then there's a navy blue one, and it just wasn't me. And I remember put that orange dress on, and I still hadn't decided how I was going to be when I was on the train on the way down. And I just thought, do you know what? This is like a job interview. I can go into that job interview and I can be anybody I want. If that, she's just told me, she's written me a playbook for how I need to be to get this job. So I can just go in there and do that. But the problem is, if I do that, then I take that job on the basis of being that person, which means every day that I sit in the chair, I have to be the person that I was in the job interview because that's what they recruited. Or I can go and be myself. And she's already told me that that's not quite what they were looking for. They wanted something a bit more dragony. And so I took a risk. I made the decision, and I only actually made it as I was going into the place, and I was like, right, I'm going to be me. And I can just remember it was from everything. It was, you know, how I was sitting in the chair, and I remember the dragons always sat very prim and proper, and I was like, not sprawled, but like legs crossed, positive body language towards the other dragons and the entrepreneurs. I was being myself, and I was being nice, and that's who I am. That's how I do business. And so... And then I had to do a practice interview, and then I had to do a piece to camera, which they would cut in with my practice interview and send to the head of the BBC to decide who got the job. And I remember in that bit of in the interview, and I said, look, I'm very aware of the fact that this is not like how you have other dragons, and I'm maybe a bit nicer, or I'm not the same behaviours as you have in a lot of dragons, but this is who I am. And if it's not right, then I wasn't right for your show. But if this is right, who you've seen today in this interview is who I would be in the show. And so then they picked me, and I got to do the show. And I remember I always felt like it's like someone had given me permission to be myself. So I sat in that den being the person I wanted to be. The difficulty is, and this is the thing I've never told you, Steve, right? So I sat in that den in the first year, still feeling like a huge imposter, really not understanding, trying to think of who I was and how that was okay to come across on screen, and how I needed to exude that in a way that was great for the entrepreneurs, great for me, great for my own brand, great for the BBC, win-win for everyone. So it was actually after the first series of Dragon's Den that I started working with you guys for the first time, and you did that amazing brand document. And I talk about this brand document all the time, because what I say is, you didn't write me a brand of who I had to be. You interviewed my friends, my family, my staff, me, And all you did was, I paid you an awful lot of money to give me a document that said, this is who I am. There was nothing, there
This is
was
you.
nothing
Yeah.
revolutionary. It wasn't the departure from who I was. It was just a 30-odd page document of who I am. But because it was written down on paper, something clicked in my mind. And then by the time I got into the den the second year, I sat in that chair thinking, I know who I am. And I know how I'm going to behave.
Yeah.
And I'm northern and proud. So I'm not going to try and hide this accent. I'm going to speak it loud and clear. And when I talk about me mum, I'm going to say me mum. I'm not going to self-correct and say my mum, because that's not
My
who I
mother.
am.
Well,
It's
yeah.
okay for me to be who I am. And I've now got a 30-odd page document of exactly who I am. And that's what I've signed up for. And that's what I'm going to do. And I think it was a really big life-defining moment for me. And I feel like it got me through that first series, but then having that security blanket of knowing who I am and what my brand was and what I stood for and how I was going to represent that all came from that very first meeting, with the executive producer, and having the permission to be myself.
That's amazing. Oh, it's lovely to hear. I suppose you talked a lot, and I've obviously done my research to listen to 2 or 3 bits and pieces that you've done recently. You've talked quite a lot about imposter syndrome, and you'll be amazed. I reckon it's come up I think we've recorded 38 podcasts up to date. Half of them, people talk about this imposter syndrome, and it's a really interesting angle, because I think we are presented with a world, especially, well, I'll just sound old now, the younger lot are presented with this sometimes perfect world, this instant gratification, everything perfect, everything, never bags under your eyes and all of that. And I think there's a change coming now where people are starting to say, no, I don't need to be like that. And if you can be yourself, it's miles easier, isn't it, than always
What
being
does
an
that
act.
say? Be yourself, because everything else is taken.
Yeah.
And the biggest,
I like that.
I spend my whole life trying to get through whatever armor someone's put up, whatever cloak they've worn. I want to get through that, and I want to get to know the real person. And within my business, the people I work with, the people I employ, I've got to the nitty gritty of who they are as people, and that's what I want. And then I create an environment for that person to thrive. And what I always say on imposter syndrome, right? Look at me on the den, right? That executive producer, she knew exactly who I was. I wasn't pretending to be anything else. She got the real version, Sara Davies, and she, along with the producers, along with the casting directors, along with the commissioners, and then the head of the BBC, they decided that was what they needed to be a dragon, right?
Yeah.
They are fully qualified to make that decision. I'm not. I've never recruited a dragon for Dragon's Den, so how would I know what's right? I've got an opinion, doesn't mean my opinion's right? They decided I was good enough to sit in that chair. So I sat in that chair for the first year feeling an enormous amount of imposter syndrome. And it's not until I reflect back on that moment now and I think that was ridiculous. I'm not qualified to decide who can and can't do this. They are, and they decided I was good enough to be there.
Chose you.
So my job is to sit here and show them that they made a good decision by being authentically me. And if you're always just authentically you, then it's fine. And I remember my leadership coach saying to me once, I said, I really struggle with the fact that there's all these different Saras, and I'm wearing different hats all the time. And she said, stop thinking like that. They're not. They're the same Sara based on the same set of values. It's just you dial up or dial down certain values in certain situations, but it's the same version of you. And again, as soon as I knew that and I made peace with that, I was like, yeah, if you bump into me in Tesco, or if you are an entrepreneur on Dragon's Den, or if you are a sound guy working on Strictly who's met me, or if you are an entrepreneur at a conference where I speak, or whatever walk of life you bump into me in, you'll get exactly the same version of me. And you will know, because you'll feel it. People always say to me, the biggest compliment I get is, you're just like I thought you were going to be. And I think if you're always just authentically you can always be that. And with imposter syndrome is any opportunities you get in life, grasp them. Because somebody who's qualified to decide whether or not you're good enough for that, they've put you forward for that opportunity. So just make it worthwhile. I was sharing this theory on imposter syndrome recently. I've just made friends with Becky Langley, who is the head coach for Newcastle United Women's Football Club. And she really struggles with a lot of her girls have an imposter syndrome. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm playing for Newcastle United.
This great,
How
incredible.
did I get to be here? This is my career. I'm earning a living at doing this. Is unbelievable. And she's used this same theory and she said to them, I decided that you were good enough. I put you here. So just show that I made the right decision. Stop second guessing it. It wasn't your call to make. It was my call to make, and I've decided. And I just think it's such a powerful statement to make. And I was really glad that like insight could help her in a completely different walk of life. But imposter syndrome, honestly, it's crippling for so many people.
Oh, it is, and it's a real thing. It's interesting just hearing you go through all of that. Simon did that to you all those years ago, didn't he? Without you knowing what it was called or that you think, because he basically validated you by his decisions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Never thought about that before. Yeah.
But think about what you've just, so that coach, so Simon basically said, I'm selecting you. I'm selecting this business to support you for us to succeed. And that coach has selected those players for that team to win.
Yeah.
You should never have had it. Simon gave you that endorsement.
I know.
20
but
years ago.
Do you know what I always say though? A lot of women I meet could be in their 60s, their 50s, and still suffering from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I cracked this in my 30s. I'm bloody lucky. I've had half my life. I'll hopefully touch will be able to go along not dealing with imposter syndrome. So I just think let's try and instill this in young girls and young people. Like it doesn't. Let's try and knock it on the head. So I am all about shouting about imposter syndrome, and I really hope that some people hearing this, that might have resonated for them.
Definitely. Well, it's the next book, if not, isn't it, eh?
Yeah, there you go.
So, tell us then, Dragon's Den, what do those, I was going to say victims, what do those entrepreneurs who go into the den get when they get Sara Davies on their team? Talk us through a bit of that, because I think people are fascinated to know, is it all just nothing happens? But I know you get involved, and you, from what we can tell from this, you're emotionally involved as well, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, if I'm in with both feet, whatever it is in life. And so all the dragons do it differently, and this is what works for me. So what I like to do is we film the den in May, June time. And so by the end of June, I've got a cohort of up to a dozen new businesses that have said yes to me in the den. Now, not all of those businesses will go through and decide they want to go on and have the investment or whatever, but I've potentially got up to them dozen, right? And I think it's as much about making sure I'm right for them as they're right for me. So the first thing I do is every year in September, I host a conference, and I have those new businesses come together with all of my existing businesses. And I host a big conference over a couple of days, and they get to experience what it is like working, so they get to talk to other entrepreneurs who work with me. And, I can be really hands-on, but also I can be really hands-off. It just depends on what a business needs. Mm-hmm. And I've got a support network around me of other business advisors. And I think by coming to that conference, the best thing is get to know me through the other people who work with me. That hopefully should tell people what it's like doing business with me and being involved with me. And my motivation for being involved in a company, the financial side is just a tiny little bit of it. It's got to be people I love working with, and it's got to add to my life. There was a one on the den a couple of weeks ago, Alex, Mystery Jersey King, and he got absolutely slated because he didn't know his numbers. I mean, the poor lad got slated, right? But he was my kind of guy. And I could tell that I was going to have a challenge on my hands trying to get him to work within the confines of what an entrepreneur needs to and learn his numbers and do all of this. So I thought, I'm going to take a punt on you because you know what? He's been brilliant to work with, and I've learned so much. Every day's a school day, growth mindset. Got to have your eyes to this stuff. And it's not just about what money am I going to make. It's about the enhancements, both sides.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? The fact that you'll learn from them, because people are coming through with different ideas and they're creating businesses that we didn't even think would be a thing 10 years ago. You think you could do and that also, for anything? Yeah.
You've alluded to it a bit here. Doing business today, Christ, nowadays we used to fax people. It's different how the world works these days. You've got to keep up with the kids. And this is my way of, I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I don't have motivations to launch other businesses and do it all again. So I've got to get that learning and those kicks as well from other businesses that I'm involved with. And this is how I do it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it sounds like one of your drivers is you've got a passion to grow things. Like you say, it doesn't have to be your own thing. Going back to where you said Simon's skills lie, he's an operator, and my word, as entrepreneurs, if we can call ourselves that in a collective noun, we need operators, because I'm the same. I love building stuff, but when it gets successful, I'm like, right, that's a bit boring now. What can I get on to next? And like you say, it doesn't have to be your own thing. It could be helping a friend. It could be helping a mate, a family. And it's, you get your kicks out of seeing something go from someone's idea over a beer to, oh, look, he's just done their second year of this and it's growing.
Yeah.
So you're right.
It doesn't have to be your own financial success. It's you can, being a part of someone else's story can be even more rewarding than writing your own.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting about the driver, because from what you've said, you wanted to succeed. You didn't go, right, how can I make the most money? The money came after you did something well. And we see it a lot with when we're working with different clients, it's like, oh, they live and breathe their products, their passion, their culture, and everything is them. And eventually the success follows, where it's the other way around. It becomes very short term, and it's where the things that fly and then bust. And I think it's a bit of a life lesson to think you'll be happier by doing something and building something and then being rewarded in that way around. I don't know what you think about that.
Totally. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And it's you can't buy happiness. You can't. So you've got to. For me, I've got to love what I'm doing. Whether that's within Crafters Companion, whether that's within my investment portfolio, within my TV career, any other side hustles I'm working on, I've got to love what I'm doing, because it's getting a piece of me. And success. There's so many measures of success, and financial isn't the only one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why it's interesting what you've gone into, isn't it? You've seized opportunities that have been presenting because of your business career into new areas and things like that. Because you've got a book coming out soon, haven't you? We've got to plug that, haven't we? Tell us a bit about that.
Yes. So, really interesting. When I was in my 20s and I was learning about business, I read every goddamn autobiography going. Everybody's autobiographies, right? And I can't really remember what any of them said. I even read business lesson books where you don't remember what they said.
No.
I remember how they made me feel. And I can remember I read Duncan Bannatyne's, right? And I've probably got it up there on the shelf. Yeah. I read Duncan Bannatyne's autobiography. And I remember reading it and thinking, well, there's nothing special about him, is there not? I mean, he's not Brains of Britain. He hasn't grown up with a silver spoon in his mouth. He's had no opportunities that anybody else couldn't have had. But he's got so much grit and determination and drive and passion. He's made a huge success out of what he's done. If he can do it, I can do it. And that's how I felt. I felt really... He didn't give me the playbook for how to do it. It was just the feeling and the belief that I couldn't. That's what I needed. And it had a huge impact on my life. A huge impact on my career. And so I vowed that, if I ever had the opportunity to write a book, I wanted to write a book to make other people feel the way that I felt when I read his book. And I want women especially, because I had all these male role models I looked up to. We need some female role models. So I wrote my autobiography, and you've met me now. I've got a good story to tell about everything, right? I love a good story. So my autobiography...
I assume it's quite a thick book.
I worked with a wonderful writer, because I can't say it in 10 words, I'll say it in 100, I'll say it in 100. So I worked with a brilliant ghostwriter, Alex Hemmingsley. I told her all the stories. She pulled that into a book. So it's brilliantly well written. Anyway, a couple of years later, I met a great guy who he works in business, a lot of coaching. And he was helping me plan some of my corporate speeches. And what he said after I'd done a few sessions with him, he said, "Oh my God, you've got so many stories, Sarah, so many." And he said, "I thought they were all in your autobiography, but they're not. There's only like 20% of them in your autobiography." I said, "Oh yeah, it's only this thick, the book. I've got loads of stories." And he just said, "I think you've got stories to tell, Sarah." And I know, like, if you've ever read 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Patrick Lencioni, I like it because it's a fable. It means so much more to me. Reading the story, it then resonates. And so what we did is, and he helped me work out, I just talked to him. He pulled out 52 lessons in my life. And each lesson, what we did was, I tell the story of what happened in my life, and then I give you a little bit of a synopsis of really what I want you to take away from it. What's the key takeaway from that lesson of what's happened in my life? And then what can you do to have some self-reflection for you to take those learnings forward in your life. And we structured it as 52 chapters. And the whole point is, I want you to read one a week.
Yeah.
Not all in one go, because if you do that, you'll get to chapter 40 and you won't remember what chapter 2 said. But by doing one a week and spreading it over the year, it's a year's worth of self-development, but it doesn't feel like a self-development because really you just read a little story about what Sara did here. And you'll things like the imposter syndrome, right? And even like that, learn about what I wear and how that made me feel. And what about the website? All those are little stories in the book that you can take from. So, yes. I cannot wait. It's the 6-minute entrepreneur, because the theory is you've got to be able to give up 6 minutes a week to do some self-development. And in 6 minutes, you can read the story, take the learning, and then spend the next week reflecting on it. And I just think even if 2 or 3 of them stories over the year impact you in such a way that it enables you to do something different, I'll have had a massive, monumental impact on hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs up and down the country, and I'll feel like I've done my bit.
Amazing. So when's it out? Is it out yet?
Could be out in the middle of March.
Middle of March. Right.
Middle of March. So it's 6-minute entrepreneur, but then also, because there's the 52 stories and then I've got a ton more, I've actually done like a little free YouTube channel. So I'm doing loads of the stories on YouTube as well. So
did you have 5 minutes spare in your week you thought you might as well fill?
Six
actually.
Right, yeah.
Sorry.
And I sit in my office here and I set the camera up and I talk and I set myself a timer. So I'll say, right, I'm going to talk about imposter syndrome. And then what I'm going to do is I'll talk about for 6 minutes and then shut off at 6 minutes. And we upload one a week every Thursday onto YouTube, and I pop it on my blog as well. And I get messages from people all over the country saying, it's really landing for us. I'm learning so much stuff every week, but it's just...
So that's live now before the book then?
Yeah,
so that's like,
I've been doing that for months now. Have a little look. 6-minute entrepreneur.
Yeah. I love it. It's just the infection for all of this is just wonderful. And like you say, if that can rub off on people, and you realise that, I think that's it. I've talked about my daughter going through her GCSEs at the moment and worrying about this. And it's a stressful time for kids where they're having to make all these decisions when they haven't got a clue about what they're going to do in life.
Terrifying.
And I think you just this idea of if you can bring energy and passion. It's like when we hire like a graduate, not being rude, degrees are degrees, unless you're going into something where you need a degree. Whereas in our world, it's like it's a person that you're hiring. Mm-hmm. And it's so important that person, when they rock up that interview, brings an energy. All right, they've done the research, they know about your business. That's obviously a bit of a starter for 10. But the rest of it, all they can bring is an energy and an attitude to learn, and then we'll teach them. And I think that the fact that you're doing that now is just a brilliant confirmation of that's how you learn and that's how you develop, not by passing exams and stuff.
No, I always say you can teach anybody anything. You can't teach them to be the right person.
Yeah.
And so when I say recruit, I always say we're a round hole company and we need round pegs. So I just go and if I feel like you're the right sort of round peg and you've got that drive, the passion, the ambition, you want to push the company forward, you'll work hard with me, brilliant. I'll teach you the skills you need. No problem.
I'll give you every year.
I can't teach you to have that.
Yeah, it is. And that energy is something that, and that counters all that they see on social media about, that's it, just rock up and you're famous. It's not. You do the work. And like I told you, that chap that I met yesterday who said, this business, it's an overnight success that took 10 years. And I just was like, use that. Yeah, we're all going to use that. Oh, sorry.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, and you look at that, and that for me just sums up everything that we're trying to do with this podcast now. It's like just to understand, talk about how long did it take us just to get to when somebody had heard of Crafter's Companion or Sara Davies, and it's not a fast thing.
Yes, yeah.
Great.
It's consistent hard work over a number of years. The problem is not enough people talk about the hard work and what goes into it. They just see, it's like social media versus reality. They see where you got to, they haven't seen the work that's gone in to get it there.
I think also talk about the things that have gone wrong, because it does, not everyone's journey has ups and downs, and you obviously always get the edited highlights where, then we grew this much. The year before, we actually lost money. It's like, it's what happens. There are so many factors, much more than when I first started in business, and probably you, where the macro effect on our businesses is a lot greater than it ever was. In terms of something going on in America impacts now what a client will spend on product A or B, and it's much harder than it was. But there is opportunity if you're prepared to graft hard and look and find the opportunities for both your business and the client's business. I think it's a really interesting one.
Couldn't agree more.
We're nearly getting to the end of our time, because I promise you could go and cook the kids' tea, which is literally the most important job for us all.
Yep.
But in terms of how are you balancing, because obviously you've got Dragon's Den, it's quite obviously a intense filming, I assume, for what, 4 or 5 weeks, is it? And then you get a bit of time. Then
it's all the work afterwards. I mean, Dragon's Den's like an iceberg. You see the tip, the filming, it's all the work underneath. It's an enormous amount of work. Yeah.
And obviously my mother would kill me if I didn't mention Strictly, but we can't go into that because literally the kids will be having a very late supper if not.
They would be. Again, I could talk all day. It was the best experience of my life.
We'll have a follow-up on that, because I heard you on the True Performance podcast and it was brilliant what they did on there. In terms of like that balance now of how are you managing to do everything? Because, you know, you're back in Crafters a bit more now. Mm-hmm. You've got obviously Dragons going, and you've got those investments, and you've got speaking. I've been lucky enough to hear you entertain a room of 300 business leaders, and I know you've done a lot more of it. So are you managing, I suppose the question is actually, are you managing to find time for Sara?
No, do I make as much time as I want to chill out and do my other things? No. But like that, you know, when I've spoken, those events where I go and speak fill my cup up so much. It's like that's my downtime. Yeah. The time with the family is so different to the time with work that is the decompression I need from here. But then also, this is the stimulant that I need from here. So I just think all of what I've done is, instead of thinking, oh, work's the chore and I need some me time away from it, I've tried to keep all these plates spinning, and they all bring a different facet into my life that contributes to being me and fills the tank up in a different way. So I don't need to find downtime. I use my downtime to go and speak to a room of entrepreneurs, which other people might think sounds crazy, but that's where I get my tank filled up and I get my kicks. But my one big thing is I've come to accept I can't give anything the amount of time that I want to.
Yeah.
I'd love to spend more time with my investments from Dragon's Den if I could. I'd love to spend more time in the business. And if I did, you know, it would be even better for Crafters Companion. I'd love to be at home more with the kids or take more holidays in the year, right? But it's not feasible. So I just always accept I'm running at 80%, and I've got to make 80% good enough, because 100% isn't feasible. So got to get the most I can in the 80% I can give it.
That's fascinating though, isn't it? Because it means that you're not feeling like you're letting yourself down. You just set yourself a target that you can then achieve.
Yep. Otherwise you feel like a failure.
Exactly.
If you set yourself targets you're never going to achieve, Strictly, there you go, there's your one, Strictly learning. I was never ever going to be good enough to win. So I never set out to try and get to the final. I did an assessment of all of the talent on the first week. I watched the dress rehearsal and I thought, where am I versus everybody else? And there was half of them that were clearly better than me at dancing. You know, they'd been to stage school or they were professional or whatever it is, right? Half of them were better than me. There was half of them who give them a damn good run for their money. So in my head, winning the jackpot was getting to halfway. So I set myself that as a target. So it was always an achievable target. If I set myself the target of getting to the final, I was always going to fail. Yeah. And then I was always going to feel like a failure.
Amazing. I love that. So right, quick bit of reflection. 2 questions, I promise you, and I think you'll be able to answer these quite easily. You've obviously mentioned quite a few folk that you've met along the way who've been influential. Are there any you would call out that really, I mean, I think we've covered a couple, but really made a difference to get you where you are today? That you go, that was a real pivotal moment.
I've definitely talked about a lot of the people, but my leadership coach Kirsty has been hugely influential in my life. The Gabriel Investors Board that I was on, the other women on that board played a huge role in shaping me as an entrepreneur in them early years. And then also I was on the board of directors for the Craft and Hobby Association in the US in my mid-20s. That was really instrumental in making me who I am. But also, I think you are a product of the people you surround yourself with. Choose really wisely. You know, I used to joke for years and say I was just a mishmash of me dad and Simon. You know, so much of my dad's influence on me, so much of Simon's influence, and I was a mishmash of the two. I'm so conscious of I am a product of the people I surround myself with. So be very mindful of who I surround myself with. You know, just have good, positive energy and positive influences in my life.
That's brilliant. It's so true, isn't it? Because you soak up what is there and you reflect it back. I love that. Final question then. You're talking to young Sara not long ago. Come on, because you're still young. And what would be one piece of advice you would give yourself now when you look back and you're about to kick off, obviously, at university? I mean, who doesn't start their own business at university? I mean, it's so common nowadays. But what would be the one thing you wish you'd known then that you now know?
So we touched on this a little bit when we were talking, and I was talking about in my 20s, I was always being somebody else to be good enough to be in that room. But thank God I realised by the time I got to my 30s that I was good enough. Sara got invited to that room, and Sara's going to show up in that room. She's good enough, and if she's not welcome there, then that room shouldn't have her. You know, that room is bloody lucky to have me in. And so I just feel at least I was grateful that I realised that in my early 30s. That's the one thing I would say to little Sara is you are good enough. You are. Don't try and be somebody else. Be yourself, because that's everybody else is taken. Be yourself, and that will be good enough to get you wherever you are supposed to be. Trust that the universe has a plan for you and follow it.
We can't add to that. That is brilliant. I think that's brilliant, obviously, advice to yourself, but to everybody else listening. And I'll be going home and telling my daughter that very fact this evening.
You go and tell her. You
I
get
will.
it. She can be the first one to listen to the episode.
There you go. That'll be tonight. We'll all sit around and listen. Sara Davies, thank you so much, darling. That was just incredible. Like you say, I obviously, like a good Boy Scout, prepared loads of. I've done about 5% of my questions, but in a great way. So we'll hopefully have a follow up when the book's out and everything. But
Perfect.
Sara, thank you very much indeed for giving your time. I really appreciate it.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope people find it really useful.
Thank you.